Testing, testing, 1, 2, 3.
Mic check 1 2. Mic check 1 2.
Thank you. Well, today, thanks again for joining us. I'm joined here today by Dr. Alexia Harrist and Superintendent Balow for what I anticipate will be a pretty full press conference today. Let me start by talking a bit about COVID-19 as I have done before. We have 1,203 positive cases, 311 probable positive cases. That makes 1,514 total cases that are positive. 860 have recovered. 237 have probably recovered. So that means that there are 1,097 that have recovered, leaving a balance of 417. What is disappointing about that number is that we continue to rise. I was thinking for some time that we were doing pretty well, staying in that right around 150 to 220 case, and now we see these cases continuing to continue to rise. There are 19 19 new cases today. I will say there is a little bit of an uptick in hospitalizations. There are 9 hospitalizations today, but happily our infection rate stays at about 2.9%. That's certainly much nicer considering what's going on elsewhere in the country at this point. Our dashboard remains unchanged, but I will say, as I mentioned before, these cases continue to rise, with 27% of our lab-confirmed cases coming in just the last 2 weeks. But the majority of those have come from 7 counties. And let me just point out that I, like many other governors, have been anxious to reopen the economy. In our case, I made the point that we never actually fully closed our economy. But what's really disappointing now nationally, as people act with some carelessness, is that we're seeing states, Florida, Texas, Arizona, California, that are having to reconsider closures. This is something we don't want to do. I cannot imagine having to reopen your business for a period of time and then kind of go back into a more stringent order. So it really does depend on the people of this state, as it has right from the beginning, to exercise good judgment, to do the right thing, and I know you will. I know you will, because really there are 3 possible outcomes, and I think these are incredibly important to bear in mind. One is we do the right thing and we continue to stay open, we continue to see progress. I was very hopeful up until about a week ago when we started to see this rise that we could have eliminated all of our orders. And because of the fact that we've seen some of these changes, I think we've extended our orders to July 15th. So that's one outcome. Do the right thing, stay open. Second one, maybe we have to do something, kind of rescinding some of our orders, rolling them back. I know most people are going to give us the victory signal, one finger at a time, but that's maybe something we have to do. And if they don't pay attention, then, as we have seen, businesses having to close because their staff is sick and they can't do it. So, 1, do the right thing. 2 other possible outcomes. Let's do the right thing. And you all know that that means social distancing, good hygiene, wearing a face covering. You can do that when you can't social distance. It's starting to come across. It's actually kind of fun to see as people are beginning to understand that there are ways that they can wear their face masks that are not political statements. I want to say that the Department of Health has done a great job of improving testing, and I think Dr. Harrist will talk to you a little bit about some of the new testing measures that we have. Contact tracing, as we see these cases go up in these counties, the contact tracing is absolutely essential. It is a very labor-intensive and challenging task, but we're doing it well. Today, we are announcing the release of the Care 19 Diary. It's an app that you can download from the Google Store or the Apple Store. And it's something that North Dakota Governor Doug Burgum and South Dakota Governor Kristi Noem have both talked to me about. It's being used in both of those states. It's an entirely voluntary app. It allows you to track where you've been, who you've been with. The data is anonymous. It's completely voluntary. And as I say, it comes with a high degree of recommendation from Governor Burgum and Governor Kristi Noem of the Dakotas. And it is now available. So with that, I'd like to pause and give Dr. Harrist a moment to bring you up to date on some of her news. Thank you.
Thank you, Governor. We expected to continue seeing cases of COVID-19 over time in Wyoming. That's the nature of this type of virus. But we are now detecting cases at the highest rate we have seen at any point of this pandemic, indicating the continued importance of all of us taking measures to limit transmission to protect ourselves, our families, our businesses, and the most vulnerable in our communities. At the same time, we also believe Wyoming is in a better position to respond to the cases that we identify than we were a few months ago. We know more about the virus than we did then. Our healthcare system is more prepared, and we can test more people. Testing is important because it allows us to put our prevention tools into place. The Wyoming Public Health Laboratory continues to work to expand our capacity. As part of our long-term care facility surveillance testing, we have tested 2,239 individuals and identified 2 positive cases. Widespread follow-up facility testing where these positive individuals were located indicated no additional cases, which is a testament to those facilities and the precautions that they are taking to protect their residents and staff. We have also purchased 50,000 saliva-based tests that will be used to expand surveillance testing to other high-risk settings. We will continue to identify opportunities to expand testing that makes sense for Wyoming. Contact tracing involves identifying people who have an infectious disease and their close contacts. We then work with them to interrupt disease transmission. Together with our partners in the counties, we have been doing contact tracing all along for COVID-19 cases. In fact, 97% of our lab-confirmed cases and their close contacts have been interviewed. Of those, 88% have been interviewed within 24 hours of the lab result. We know contact tracing has helped limit transmission so far, and it can also help us respond to current and future outbreaks. Technologies such as the CARE-19 diary app the Governor discussed offer an option to enhance our current contact tracing efforts. The Wyoming Department of Health is also in the process of providing CARES funding to counties to support both personnel for contact tracing and other efforts related to COVID-19 and to support increasing testing availability. We also continue to remind people who have symptoms consistent with COVID-19 to stay home and away from others unless they need medical care, and recommend that they ask a medical professional about getting tested. We know some individuals can transmit the virus to others before they feel or show any symptoms. This is very important because it means people can spread the virus to other people without realizing they're infected. It's also becoming increasingly clear the virus spreads mainly between people when they are close to each other. When an infected person coughs, sneezes, or talks, the tiny respiratory droplets they produce can spread through the air to people who are nearby, typically within 6 feet. These 2 pieces of information are critical and are the foundation of why we strongly recommend physical distancing whenever practical. We also highly encourage people to wear cloth face coverings in public settings where it is not possible or reasonable to stay physically apart. They truly can help block virus transmission. With summer here, more people are enjoying various events. And of course, we have a very important holiday weekend coming up. It's possible to have fun while taking part in these activities safely. Stay 6 feet away from people from other households and wear face coverings. Our attention to these precautions this weekend could very well have significant impacts on the course of the outbreak and our ability to further ease restrictions. The truly scary situations we have been working to prevent in Wyoming for months now are happening in new places, even in neighboring states. There are exploding case counts, more deaths, and yes, overwhelmed hospitals. No one wants that to happen here in Wyoming. We all have things we are looking forward to this summer and into the fall, including sending Wyoming's children back to school. I believe if people in Wyoming follow our simple, common sense recommendations, we can do those things in a safe and responsible manner. Thank you, Governor.
Thank you, Dr. Harrist. And I think that the point you made is absolutely essential. In this coming next weekend, we have one of the biggest holiday seasons, and it is possible to be safe. It is possible to act sensibly and still have a very, very good time. It's the anniversary of our country's founding, and it is one where personal responsibility is absolutely enshrined in our Constitution. And I think it's one that we should all remember exactly our own personal obligations. We're very hopeful that events like the Cody Stampede that will be occurring over the next few days will go off without a hitch. And we're very confident that the people of Wyoming will take this responsibility carefully. I do want to say that I have to thank Superintendent, who will speak next, for her leadership on the COVID-19 Education Task Force. She has done a phenomenal job of developing plans to engage students this fall. We all hope that the schools can open, but we need to prepare for all eventualities. And I think the good superintendent will give you an update on kind of how those plans have gone. Thank you, Superintendent.
Well, good afternoon, and thank you, Governor Gordon, Dr. Harrist. I'd also like to thank Governor Gordon for your leadership as well, and for the COVID-19, allowing us to have the COVID-19 task force. Within the task force were opportunities for working groups, and one of those working groups was called the Smart Start Working Group, and I'd like to thank the members of the Smart Start Working Group as well as the leaders also. As my team and I continue to work virtually, and we've begun to venture out for a few face-to-face meetings, I hear one question and one question only in every conversation, and that is, will schools open in the fall? Almost always, their question is followed by a comment, something like, they really need to, kids have got to get back to school, and I couldn't agree more. So my goal today is to discuss some of the factors that we considered when thinking about reopening schools this fall, and to present the Smart Start guidance document for reopening schools this fall. So our efforts to adapt to the COVID-19 environment have been immense over the last 3 months. These efforts transcend education, of course, but education underpins many other things that happen in our community, including our economy. Today, I will lay out the plan at the state level to reopen schools. My goal is to ensure that students continue to have access to the same high-quality education experience that they always have in Wyoming, no matter what the circumstances are, and also to empower communities to make the very best decisions. In March, and almost overnight, the health and safety of Wyomingites was placed above all else as we quickly learned about adapting to a life that was our new normal. Since then, educators and parents have delivered education and student services in ways and to a degree never done before. And while school doors closed to students, education stayed open for business, but not without challenges, lessons learned, and even successes. First, no one was prepared, and I mean no one was prepared to shift to an adapted learning environment literally overnight. Some of the best teachers struggled to deliver content and connect with students without face-to-face interaction. Some students who were on track to success faltered. Worse yet, some students who counted on school for stability and food and safety found themselves tragically alone. As a system, we were unable to deliver the statewide summative assessment known as YTOP. We also suspended calculations for school accountability. And as a system, we lack the infrastructure and expertise to support schools with many of the challenges that they faced. But there were also moments of inspiration. Some students and teachers found more success in an adapted learning environment than ever before. And within 2 days of school closures, every single school district across Wyoming was providing meals to students who needed food. Everyone went above and beyond to ensure that kids were fed. And I'd like to thank First Lady Jenny Gordon, who fanned these flames ever since with her Hunger Initiative to make sure that feeding kids and working with schools and families is sustained, and it remains a priority in our state. Many of our smallest districts fared the best because of community engagement, family engagement, and their ability to mobilize all students and staff with technology and adapted learning techniques. Without the constraints of bells and classes, online communities of students and teachers popped up all across our state. I personally hosted online conversations with hundreds of students and members of our federal delegation and even Wyoming author C.J. Box. Teachers found new ways to engage students and families were more engaged than ever. Graduation parades took place across the state, safely bringing families, friends, educators, and graduates together to celebrate. So today, as we look at reopening schools in the fall, I'm confident that we will be successful, not only in reopening schools as we knew them, but also transforming our school system to better address the challenges that we faced and incorporate some of the successes and lessons that we learned. Thus, the Smart Start Guidance document. This framework lays out the requirements, the recommendations, and the considerations that will help ensure that schools not only open safely for the 2021 school year, but that a quality education continues throughout the school year, no matter the health environment. Smart Start was developed by a working group of expert stakeholders from across Wyoming education, health, and technology sector. And I'd like to again thank them for their work and their leadership. The working group was led by Wanda Maloney, Accountability Director in my department, as well as Stephanie Pyle, the Senior Administrator in the Public Health Division at the Wyoming Department of Health. During other times, we may have spent more time dotting our I's and crossing our T's, but we're committed to getting this guidance out on the streets, so to speak, because it serves as a critical conversation guide for our schools, school boards, and communities. In the document, there are 3 tiers of operations, of school operations. Tier 1 is where we are right now. Schools are open to students with some new health precautions, such as social distancing for all students or the use of masks. Tier 2 is a combination of in-person instruction with possible intermittent closures and quarantine of some students and staff. We call this the hybrid tier, and it can look different from community to community and even from school to school. And Tier 3 is the full closure of school buildings to students at the county or the state level, like what occurred at the end of last school year. For each tier, requirements, recommendations, and considerations are laid out in 4 key areas. Communications to students, teachers, parents, and the public, safety and wellness for all, school operations, including transportation and sports, and instruction and technology. The bulk of decision-making in each of these areas is in the hands of your communities. Health officials, school boards, educators, parents, and even students will make important decisions in the coming weeks. Communities know best how to address your own unique challenges. As I said, requirements, recommendations, and considerations are what is laid out in the framework. And the guidance lays out requirements, which are few and come from the state level. We'll be checking those through assurances provided by school districts and through our accreditation process. Recommendations should be carefully considered at the local level in collaboration with stakeholders in education and county health officials. And the considerations are just that. They're considerations for teachers, administrators, parents, healthcare professionals, and others. One key goal of Smart Start is that Wyoming schools are prepared to quickly and efficiently adapt your school operations in your community in response to your challenges, which brings me to your role as a citizen. Many of you have heard me say that education is everyone's business, and indeed it is, and that is especially true today. Public education meets the needs of the public. It meets your needs. And public education is changing to meet those needs. We can all be part of the success. First, expect change. During the 2019-2020 school year, precious instructional time was lost for all of us as we faltered and adapted to learning packets and remote education. We know better now. Technology will be an integral part of every school's tiered approach to school operations and educational delivery. Using technology to meet the needs of learners and to pivot to a different tier of school operation takes time and training for all of us. It is in the Wyoming spirit to show grace and to show grace to one another and to do what must be done. Second, take responsibility. New health and safety protocols will be in place for a long time, maybe forever. We can help slow the spread of COVID-19 and other diseases by following the same guidance that you heard Governor Gordon and Dr. Harrist reiterate today. Stay home when you're sick. Wash your hands, practice good hygiene, social distance, or wear a mask. Some of these protocols will be required, such as social distancing, and all are encouraged. Lead by example for Wyoming's youth. We know that there are many decisions to be made in the coming weeks, and included in this framework are options for families, for schools, and for communities. Also, the Wyoming High School Activities Association has worked diligently to lay out requirements and work with school districts about requirements for fall sports and beyond. This guidance document is now available on our website and in several news releases that were released today and will be released after this press conference. Wyoming now has the tools that they need to develop a plan for reopening schools. This document serves as a discussion outline for conversations that have started in your community well before today. Funding from the Federal CARES Act is going to almost every school district across the state, and it is to be spent on expenses related to recovery from COVID-19 and the mitigation and prevention of future pandemics. And most importantly, I hope that you are more informed today as a student, an educator, a parent, or a citizen, and I encourage you to be part of the solution in your community. Plans for each school district, along with initial assurances, will be submitted to my department, the Wyoming Department of Education, and my staff and I stand ready to support communities and schools in the coming weeks. In closing, I again want to thank Governor Gordon for his leadership, and I want to thank the educators, parents, and students who are committed to innovating through COVID-19 as the next generation is molded in our schools and in our state, and most importantly, in our homes. Thank you, Governor Gordon.
Thank you, Superintendent. Your leadership on this has been steadfast and extraordinary. I remember on the Friday after the legislature went home, you and I discussed what COVID-19 might mean for education, and at that time we were trying to plan, and quickly things spiraled very quickly out of control, and I think your leadership brought a very coherent, thoughtful approach to how we dealt with that sudden, literally overnight decision to close our schools. And we are working together hand in glove to make sure that students have the chance to go back to school, be successful, and that these are not lost semesters. And I think every parent who has been out there trying to teach their kids, sometimes multiple kids that are one computer in their home, sometimes difficult connections. These are all things that we're trying to make sure we address so that Wyoming kids and our hallmark of having an extraordinary education system continue into the future. I do want to take just a moment or two to briefly talk about the Occidental Petroleum land purchase. We recently put up on the State Office of State Lands website notice that Monday the State Loan and Investment Board will meet to consider submitting a bid for the land. The public will have a chance to comment at that meeting prior to the vote. I want to stress that this has entirely been a consideration of whether this is a good investment for the state's portfolio. I think there have been a number of notions that this is somehow an attempt by the state to get into the oil and gas industry. It is not. It is, others have said it might be an attempt for us to work on becoming more of a coal extraction endeavor. That is not the case. This is strictly a case of will this investment and the analysis pay dividends back to the state. And I don't say dividends in the investment term. I'm talking about income back to the state that lowers our taxes. As every citizen in Wyoming knows, between $1,500 and $3,000 of their taxes are met by the investment earnings off of our combined portfolios. I want to appreciate the work of the Treasurer's Office and others who have participated in this, and I want to assure the people of Wyoming that they will have every opportunity to understand the details of this potential bid. Not only that, but they'll have a chance to comment on the approach. Just to go back and cover the bill and where we are and why we're here at this point. There was a bill that came through the legislature last year that had the following provisions in it. Make available to the public on its website the details of the proposed purchase, including the locations of the assets, the purchase price, all funding sources for the purchase, the projected cost to manage the assets purchased, and projected revenue streams from the assets purchased. B, establish an open public comment period to review the details of the proposed purchase, during which members of the public may submit written comments electronically, by mail, or both. C, during the comment period provided by subparagraph B of this paragraph, hold at least one informational public meeting or public hearing within the geographic area in Wyoming that would be affected by the proposed purchase, notice of which should be published one time in a newspaper of general circulation within the county in which the hearing is to be held, and in a newspaper of statewide circulation. At the hearing, the board shall present the terms of the proposed purchase and take the public testimony. I subsequently vetoed that bill. I did that with a very carefully crafted letter on March 26 that said the original concept of the legislation was to establish a process to conduct due diligence and provide the funding to do so, as well as bless the authority to enter into a transaction of this magnitude. That's in paragraph 2 of my letter, and I won't read the whole thing. I did compliment the legislature on the work, but I also talked about the fact that they encumbered it, plus there wasn't any funding available. And so on the final paragraph of page 1, I said, unfortunately, I am left with an all or nothing solution. Most of the requirements contained in this legislation are important and should not be forgotten, but the language overreaches in its grant of authority to the legislative branch. I also believe this legislation anticipates what is not yet clear, i.e. we don't have much information at that time on this particular asset. I do not have an option to selectively implement the legislation. In writing this action, in taking this action, I want to stress my staunch and consistent support of the state of Wyoming for having the opportunities and the ability to explore unique opportunities such as these when they arise. I commit to the legislature and citizens of Wyoming that we will continue to find ways to take steps to explore this opportunity. I will work with the Office of State Lands and report to the legislature any progress we make on that front. Should we make progress, we will provide a report including but not limited to the following: purchase price, cost of the due diligence process, recommendations for funding sources identified in SFO Senate File 138, recommendations on purchasing assets in aggregate or segregated parcels based on due diligence findings, predicted earnings and from purchased assets, specific locations of assets both in and out of the state of Wyoming based on due diligence findings, estimated fair market value of assets, estimated property tax loss to counties, both in and out of the state, Attorney General's written opinion regarding the legality of any potential purchase, recommendations on statutory changes, if any, to allow for both the purchase and asset management. Lastly, I want to commit to honor all of the requirements for public comment and public involvement outlined in the bill I am vetoing. My veto is not a means of circumventing those requirements, as they are entirely appropriate. Moreover, I believe the State Land and Investment Board and my office can even exceed the amount of public involvement and comment called for in the bill, and that is certainly our intent. There have been news stories that have spoken about today, July 1st, being the day that bids were meant to be put forward, and I want to thank Occidental Petroleum for allowing what is an extraordinarily unique set of circumstances where we have a public entity, i.e. the state of Wyoming, with very clear statutory public obligations to inform the people of Wyoming and about the nature of whatever bid we might put into place. And they have given us the opportunity to have our Monday meeting and at a later time be able to put a bid in should the board, let me stress this, should the State Loan and Investment Board think that is appropriate. Along the way, we engaged the services of Barclays Bank after an extensive review of several peer firms that could give us an extensive review of the quality of the assets in an investment context. And we engaged a number of people in Wyoming with expertise in the particular asset classes that this entire purchase represents. We also had this reviewed by the Investment Funds Committee, and they have provided recommendations to the State Board of Investments. Let me also say that should a bid, and this is not in any way a certainty, but should a bid be proffered and put forward, it would ultimately be up to Occidental whether they would accept it or not. If they do accept it, we would then have further opportunity for detailed discussions about aspects of the purchase requirements. So I want to make sure that the people of Wyoming understand that in my veto letter, a little bit awkward, but in my veto letter, when the legislature said clearly go forward and analyze this, we think it's a good thing to do, that my veto letter said I'm going to do that, but the complications that were associated with the bill and the funding of the mechanism obligated me to veto it, but I still had the commitment to honor the legislative process. And in fact, I have been in continuous conversations with the leadership, both minority and majority leadership of the legislature on this matter. So I'm happy to stand for any questions. I know we were talking a lot about COVID. I want to leave it on that note. Again, When I think about my good friend Greg Abbott having to put restrictions back on bars, when I think about my good friend Doug Ducey of Arizona having to put his restrictions back on bars, when I hear about where the Republican convention is going to be held in Jacksonville, having to put restrictions back on bars, I am very concerned that Wyoming not follow that suit. And it is possible that we can have extraordinary events that are successful. We are having softball that is being played around the state. Rodeos are occurring. Cody Stampede's coming up. That's exciting. We want to see those things continue to occur. And the superintendent and I just had the opportunity to be part of the Republican convention where it was very well regulated, and we had actually an extraordinary opportunity there. I do want to say thank you, Wyoming, for your continued vigilance. Let's not get cocky. Let's not get careless. Let's do the right thing. All the things that all of us are saying. If you feel sick, stay home. Wash your hands repeatedly. Use sanitizer if necessary. Make sure you have a face covering that you can use, and socially distance. This is a beautiful state, and it's a wonderful and honor to have people coming to visit our state, and it's helping our economy. We have Teton County, which is over capacity from last year. Park County is doing extremely well. Crook County is seeing a tremendous rise in tourism. We want to see our tourists come, enjoy themselves, and contribute to our economy, but we want to see them do it safely. We want to make sure that we in Wyoming demonstrate that safety. So with that, thank you very much, and I'd be happy to stand for some questions, and I hope you all have a wonderful 4th of July. Oh, yes. I'm sorry. Thank you, Michael. There is a submitted question from Robin Vincent of KHOL in Jackson Hole Community Radio. Yesterday, the Teton District Health Officer submitted to you a mask mandate for Teton County. Are there any reasons you would reject that health order? How soon will you make your decision? So, Dr. Harrist.
Thank you. There is increasing and broadening evidence of the effectiveness of face masks in preventing and limiting transmission of COVID-19. I've been clear for some time that I support the use of face masks for those purposes and support measures to increase the use of face masks. I strongly recommend that everyone wear face masks in situations where they may not be able to maintain 6 feet of distance from other people, including and especially indoors and in businesses. We are now carefully considering Teton County's order with our team and in collaboration with the Attorney General's office, and we do hope to have an answer very soon within the next couple of days.
Thanks.
Governor Gordon?
Yes.
This is Justin Blyzeffer.
I'm sorry. Who is it?
Justin Blyzeffer?
Yes.
Yeah, I'm just wondering, well, first of all, thank you for convening this press conference, taking some questions. Is the success in Wyoming based on our ability to respond to increasing COVID cases, or not having a spike in the COVID cases? And what can be done about the fact is that the majority of people in Wyoming don't mask up. Here in Casper, most people do not wear masks. And you know, you've continually relied on the science and available data to implore people to wear masks. What can be done to get more people to wear masks?
So Dustin, the second part of your question was what can be done to get people to wear masks, and I think you point out correctly that many places you go in Wyoming, people are not wearing masks, and you know, perhaps that has led to an uptick of the virus. I'm pretty sure that's the case. I didn't quite hear the first part of your question.
The first part is, is success in Wyoming based on our ability to respond to and treat increasing cases of COVID-19? Or is it not having a spike in new cases in the first place?
So I'm going to let Dr. Harrist address that, Dustin. You know, as you know, we put this dashboard together. So far, and I'll let Dr. Harris clarify this, but so far we've seen an uptick in cases, but we haven't really seen that. Now today there was a little bit of an uptick in hospitalizations. These are concerning. You know, as I say, we were making such good progress. Really remarkable progress, and then, you know, because I think we have the third lowest unemployment statistics in the nation. I think we, until recently, were either third or fourth lowest incidence of infection. That's now bumped up to about number 7 lowest in the country. We certainly had the third lowest number of deaths. I think people thought, no big deal. You know, we can just do what we want to. And I think that carelessness and that cavalier attitude has been incredibly unfortunate. And so, you know, I come back to saying, if you want the economy to keep going, if you want to make sure that we stay open, if you want to see us move forward to where we were hoping to be, you know, people will mask up, people will adhere to these things, people won't be so cavalier. But Dr. Harris, do you want to?
Thanks for those questions. You know, starting with I think the question was, is it better to not have a spike in the first place, or be able to, you know, respond better or treat the disease better? I mean, I think the answer is both. This entire pandemic, our actions have been both aimed at prevention, and that has been the you know, community measures we've taken through the orders in terms of social distancing and response. So being able to test cases, detect them early, implement control measures like isolation and quarantine that we identify through contact tracing. So both are important. Certainly this spike in cases concerns me, but as always, we look at the entire picture. One of our major goals this entire time was to ensure that our hospitals were not overwhelmed and that every patient who needed it is able to obtain care. We're in that place right now, and that's a good thing, but we always have to keep a close eye on that and to make sure that that doesn't happen, and we will certainly be doing that as things move forward. In terms of increasing face mask use, you know, I think the best thing that we can do is to educate people on why it's important that when you wear a face covering, you are protecting those around you. You're helping keep the businesses that you go to open by protecting the staff and other customers of those businesses. And likely with you wearing a mask, you're also providing some protection to yourself, but mainly it's protection from others. As this outbreak goes on, we'll continue to monitor the data and monitor the outbreak metrics. And if we're not seeing face covering use and we believe that that is contributing to transmission, we will consider all options that might be needed to increase that use.
Thank you, Dr. Harris. Thank you, Governor.
Thank you, Dustin. You know, as we were talking, I was sitting there thinking about the old sign that said no shirt, no shoes. Now maybe ought to include no mask, no service.
Governor Gordon, this is Tom Hallberg from the Jacksonville News and Guide.
Yes, Tom.
I have a question probably for Superintendent Balow, but I'm thinking about all of these things that would be required in a Tier 1 reopening of schools, so extra sanitation that might require extra staff or temperature checks and all these things that schools are going to have to pay for to be able to reopen. I'm wondering if there is going to be money in the CARES Act or in the Department of Ed budget or the foundation block grant to cover some of those things for districts.
Yeah, thanks for that important question. And as I noted in my remarks, school districts have already begun this discussion at the local level, and that includes a budget discussion with the school board. How are they prioritizing or reprioritizing funds? How are they leveraging other aid that might be available? Through the CARES Act, Wyoming saw close to $35 million that was tagged specifically for education. 48 of 49 school districts are benefiting from that funding, and then there's additional funding as well that's available that is still going out through the governor's office and other sources. The primary purpose for that funding is to use it for recovery and mitigation of future pandemics. So that would include exactly what you're talking about in Tier 1. Possible temperature checks, et cetera. But you'll also notice that in Tier 1, there's a great deal of responsibility that is placed on families to make sure that that screening is done prior to the beginning of the school day, so that students, when they enter the school building, have already been screened through their parents and are deemed healthy to go to school and in a place to go to school. So, but certainly there will be additional funds that may be needed by school districts, and certainly the CARES Act funding will help to defray some of that costs. Nonetheless, we know that some of those prioritization conversations are taking place now.
This is Bob Beck at Wyoming Public Radio. I had a follow-up for Superintendent Balow, if that's possible.
Sure, Bob.
Wanted to ask you, you were talking about some of the students, there have been some students that did not do very well with the online learning program. What is the idea about getting people back up to speed, especially those who may have fallen behind, and what's your plan for that?
Yeah, Bob, that's a question that everyone across the nation is grappling with right now. And we're not quite sure whether to call it a gap created by COVID-19 or a lag in instruction that needs to that just needs to be addressed. Nonetheless, there certainly is that gap, I'll call it, for all students who missed education or who maybe weren't as successful in an online environment as some of their peers were. So what we're seeing already across Wyoming, and with the health orders that now have schools in Tier 1 that is open to students, is we see things like summer learning academies. We see a number of community services like libraries providing sort of boot camps, academic boot camps. We'll see some of our schools perhaps opening early or providing additional instructional time for students who are most at risk of failure, to help kind of fill some of those gaps or make up for time. At the policy level, we'll continue to look at ways to support schools as they do that. And again, no one knows their kids better than parents and families and teachers, and so we know that the bulk of the work and the bulk of the effort needs to be done at that level with students. We want to make sure that the framework and structure is provided and the support is provided to continue that. I think that will be an issue that we grapple with for years to come, especially in the area of early literacy. And so I would anticipate that in the coming months, I know we in Wyoming, and I'm sure other states will as well, will kind of double down on our focus on great reading instruction, so that our youngest learners have the interventions that they need to make up for lost time and reach their peers and be reading at grade level or beyond by that all-important third grade.
So to quickly follow up on that, so would you see maybe a remedial effort at the start of the school year to kind of get kids back up to speed?
Bob, I think the remedial efforts are already happening, again, through some different summer opportunities that are out there, either virtually or in person, and I believe that will continue. I also see our school districts partnering a lot more closely with some of our after-school programs, and again, some of our county libraries and other partners who can help to just augment and support that remediation that needs to take place. But yes, remediation is already taking place, and it will continue to take place for the students who are most at risk of faltering and failing once the new school year starts, and even before.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
This is Andrew with Wildfile.
Yes, Andrew.
Hey, Governor. You mentioned the Occidental deal. I wanted to ask you a question about the contract with Barclays that became public this week, and it shows the state is paying $2.5 million for Barclays' work on the Occidental deal, regardless of whether a purchase goes through or not. And I wanted to ask if that is a large contract for you as governor to do, kind of without a legislative appropriation, price-wise, and if so, why you felt the need to proceed.
Yeah, thanks, Andrew. The contract was, we looked at the analysis as we would under any investment, really across the board, to get the best information that we need and to be able to make a good decision about investments. So we routinely employ consultants for everything from private equity deals to real estate acquisitions. And true, this is a substantially different arrangement, but as I say, it is something that I kept in contact with the legislature. Frankly, it was important that we get an entity like Barclays. There are a few other peers. We talked to many of them to be able to do a proper analysis of what this opportunity means for the state of Wyoming. This is not the first time that Wyoming has looked at this. Back some years ago, when this was the original UP land grant, and when it went to Anadarko, there was a time the legislature thought about doing that and actually didn't go forward. But your question is, do we have the ability to make those kinds of contracts and due diligence requirements? Yes, the issue really was about the funding. And the funding was something that was complicated at the end of the legislative session. Part of the money that was meant to be put towards, and so the legislature understood there was going to be a cost associated with the analysis of this asset, and that money was incorporated in the capital construction budget. And when that failed to pass, of course, that money was missing. We have been checking all the cushions and everything else to make sure that we can pay the obligations of that contract. And we'll be able to do that. I know there is some confusion about where that's coming from in this process we call B11s, which allows the governor to reallocate monies as is necessary. This last tranche has been reported to come out of Homeland Security. It did not. Homeland Security is part of the governor's office, but this came out of other programs in the governor's office. So I wanted to clarify that if there was any confusion.
Yeah, thank you. And then you talked about the public's opportunity to learn more and comment on this as it goes forward. There is, of course, a public SLIM meeting on Monday. But then, when do you anticipate the next public input on this process?
So we would put forth a bid if we do this. Let me stress that is a discussion yet to be had as to whether we're going to put a bid forward or not. If there is a bid, so it's a hypothetical, if there is a bid put forward, then Occidental has the opportunity to say we reject it or we accept it. If they accept it, then there is a period of negotiation, because there will be a period of negotiation, and during that period of time, I fully intend to have public hearings in Sweetwater County and Carbon County and in Uintah County, and a statewide Zoom meeting, and a number of other things. Let me stress, though, that it's important that we know what this is. It's easy enough to say, oh, there's coal, or there's natural gas, or there's trona, or there's land, and have an opinion one way or another, but we really needed to understand what the value of those were and what the potential cash flows off of that entire asset would be. When it comes to the land piece of it, most of that lies in that checkerboard area. So there are some points about public access and other things that people might want to weigh in on, all very important considerations. And I also want to say that this doesn't take the legislature out of any of that process. The legislature ultimately has the ability to make lots of determinations about this as it goes forward. But you have to have something to comment on, otherwise we just opine, and it's important we know what the value of this is. And so that's really what our diligence has been about.
Right. Just to make sure I understood correctly, you're talking about public hearings in the impacted counties if the state makes a bid, if Occidental accepts that bid, but before a purchase is completed. Is that accurate?
That's my view. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you so much, Governor.
Thank you.
Governor Gordon, it's Barbara Ann from Bighorn County Newspapers. How are you today?
I am well. How are you, Barbara Ann?
I'm well. Thank you again for taking the time to hold these press conferences. My questions are actually for Dr. Harrist today.
Very good.
I'm ready.
All righty, Doctor. We saw a spike of increases in one county that were tied to an event or a get-together that were over Memorial Day. So in the counties that have seen the spikes recently, do you know yet if any of them have been tied to a specific event, a family gathering, or a location?
Thank you for that question. There isn't one specific event or gathering that is linked to the increase in cases in the counties where we're seeing that. It is really a combination of factors. I will say that gatherings at bars and restaurants has been one of those factors. And that, keeping social distancing in those environments remains critical. Certainly, types of gatherings where people are in close contact with each other have played a role as well. Have not seen large outdoor gatherings yet, be linked to an increase in cases. I do think outdoor events are likely safer, but it's still important when people are participating in outdoor events to ensure that they're maintaining that social distancing and face covering use when that social distancing isn't possible.
Thank you. My second question would be, is it possible on the map and statistics page to add the current hospitalizations by county?
So on the hospital data page, there is a number of hospitalizations per hospital. So that's listed if you go and click on hospitalization and ICU and ventilator use data. That is there by hospital.
Thank you very much.
Hi, Governor Gordon. This is Seth of the Star Tribune.
Hi, Seth.
This might be a question for both you and Dr. Harrist, but obviously other parts of the country have seen a more, significant spike and more significant disease than we have seen, even though we're at our own sort of spike. Are you and Dr. Harris concerned at all that we might kind of reach a boiling point like Texas and Arizona both have?
Well, I am concerned, but I'm going to let Dr. Harris speak about it. I really do want to rely on the people of Wyoming to exercise good judgment, but please go ahead.
Thanks, and I certainly agree with that concern, and it's why we keep such a close eye on all of the outbreak metrics. I think hospitalizations and ICU availability and ventilator availability are all very important, along with the number of cases. Some of the data that we have are very positive, including our percent of tests that are positive remaining less than 3% as a total right now, including the surveillance we've done in long-term care facilities where we're not detecting additional cases. But we do have to be concerned about our healthcare capacity. And I think one possibility for why we're not seeing it right now could be that there is a delay in when we see increases in cases and increases in hospitalizations, based on the fact that we know some people don't become severely ill with COVID-19 until late into their first week or into their second week of illness. So that is a possibility that we have to look for and we have to plan for.
Thanks. A second question, and again, this may be better for Dr. Harris. Can you speak a little bit about the 50,000 tests you mentioned you guys had purchased? I guess what kind of sticks out to me is it sounds like the public health lab has pretty good capacity right now that it's ramped up over the past 3 months. You mentioned that the 50,000 tests will allow you to expand a little bit. I wonder if you can talk a little bit about that, why you guys felt buying those tests were necessary and what role they'll serve going forward.
Yep, thanks for that question. I think several reasons our public health laboratory is increasing their capacity and continues to increase that capacity. But, it is important to have tests available, for any scenario. If we continue to see increase in cases, if we have large outbreaks where we need to test large numbers of people, we need to be prepared for that. And that purchase is one way to prepare for that. Our lab, as you know, has been focused all along on ensuring that anyone who's symptomatic with symptoms of COVID-19 can be tested. We've expanded that to include any contacts of persons with COVID-19, and they've been doing a lot of testing for our epidemiologic investigations of outbreaks, including in long-term care facilities. But we'd like to expand that surveillance testing as well to other places in a similar way to what we're doing in nursing homes. And so that testing can be used in that way as well.
Thank you.
Hey, Governor, Max Cotton with Wyoming News Now. Just obviously, there are no new restrictions that you're putting on now, despite the increase in cases, and clear evidence that many throughout the state don't want to wear a mask. Is why that? And also the other thing is, are you considering instituting mandatory quarantines for people coming in from some of these higher risk, higher case states like Florida and Texas and Arizona?
Yeah, thanks for that, Matt. Let me say that we pressed pause. We were really feeling like we were on such a great trajectory that we really were moving to being, kind of almost completely unrestricted. And because we've seen the spike, we've had to hit pause and extend these orders for another 15 days. At this point, I am not considering a mandatory quarantine on individuals. We are seeing in places like Teton County businesses that are being overwhelmed with people that are not wearing face masks, that are coming in, and so where local conditions warrant and the local health officer believes it's mandatory that we have face coverings and some other aspects of that, we certainly support that. I think this is kind of a game of chicken to a degree, and that often doesn't end well. So it's best to use good judgment. We're really counting on people to do that. We have seen, let me just say, One of the big concerns I had when we saw the big spike, 80 cases or so in Uintah County, was it was not much more than a month and a half before that we knew Salt Lake was not accepting patients. And if you're in Wyoming, you're going to be dependent, if you get very sick, on being able to go to a place like Salt Lake or a place like Billings or a place like Rapid City or a place like Colorado. And in all of those cases, it's been a concern. I can remember an earlier conversation I had with Governor Bullock where he said, I did allow one of your patients to come through. So people that are cavalier and think this is no big deal, I can't get sick, or it won't be bad, particularly young people, it could be bad, and you may need to be transported to a hospital that will not accept you. So you know, let me just reiterate, Matt, and I know it's a longer answer than you needed. I'm very passionate about this. We were successful. We were successful because people were adhering to the right kinds of protocols, and now we're being less careful, and that is bringing consequences. And we will do whatever we need to make sure we're safe. Thanks. Another question? Okay. Well, thank you very much for today. Superintendent, again, thank you for your leadership. Thank you for always putting Wyoming kids first. I'm very honored to work with you, and I just know that your department, your team has really put extraordinary hours. Nothing less, Dr. Harrist, for your team and what you've done. Thank you for really being an example to the nation of how to address these issues. And finally, to the people of Wyoming, be safe and do have a wonderful, wonderful 4th of July. We live in the greatest nation on earth. So God bless the United States of America. God bless Wyoming. And God bless you. Thanks.